Well, hey, howdy, hi. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by to join me today. I really do appreciate it. My name is Ellie, and I'm a witch, and this over here is my teaching assistant, Andy. And today is day 2 of my False Fathers series, which I'm doing for the 4th of July. I'm just going to talk about the Founding Fathers. Yesterday, I talked about George Washington, who is probably my second favorite president, and so, let's just continue the presidency thing, and we're going to talk about John Adams today. Now, as I said in my last video, none of this is meant to discredit any of what the Founding Fathers have done. I just simply like the dark side of history. And I will say that it can be difficult to look at history and not judge based on our modern day standards and morals, and I will not say that slavery is by any means a good or acceptable practice, but when we look at history, we must acknowledge that it did happen, and based on their morals, we should not judge a person based solely on their status as a slave owner. I truly believe you can be a bad person who does good things and be a good person who does bad things. This is not an attack on John Adams, but there is nothing wrong with acknowledging and criticizing a person's mistakes or missteps. We are, after all flawed. Now, while Adams would not have agreed with that, he's dead, so let's talk about him. And I do just kind of want to get the slavery issues out of the way first, because they were obvious for that time period. But, like Washington, Adams had a complicated history with slavery. It was a deeply ingrained part of the culture, especially in the South, so most founding fathers had some interaction with slavery. Now, John Adams was outwardly against slavery, stating that his family was against slavery as a whole, and it was an abhorrent practice. He also adamantly fought against the gag rule, which had prohibited anti-slavery conversations in Congress. So John Adams did not endorse slavery, was outwardly against it, but relied on and used slaves in his personal life. His wife Louisa had grown up with slaves, and while she did not endorse it necessarily, she also did not speak negatively about growing up with slaves. Now, her sister Nancy married a man named Walter Helen, and the two had many slaves working their property. John, for his part, did not voice any opposition to the idea and was fast friends with the couple. Now, John Adams II was engaged to marry a young lady who had a servant slave named Rachel Clark, and the couple lived with John Adams Sr. and the family for many years. And it wasn't actually until the wedding that Rachel was set free, though many speculate that it was only so that a slave was not being owned by an Adams. Not because they truly abhorred the practice, but for the social aspect. But John Adams was friends with many slave owners and was aware of their slaves, but did not speak out about them. Now, many believe he was strictly anti-slavery for political benefits. There are many people who also criticize him in response to the Boston Massacre. For those who aren't familiar, the Boston Massacre was an incident where 9 British soldiers fired into a crowd of 300 to 400 Boston citizens. Now, to be fair, they had been yelling at the soldiers and throwing snowballs and other small items and yelling at them to fire. Well, the soldiers fired into the crowd, though there was no order to fire. 3 citizens were killed instantly and 8 were wounded. 2 later died from their injuries. Now, Adams was legal representation for the soldiers as he wanted them to have a fair trial. He was able to get all but 2 soldiers acquitted, and the 2 that were charged were found guilty of manslaughter and simply branded on their thumbs. Now, many had issues with this as tension against England was high, but Adams had a lot of support for the British, even though he ended up being American president. Speaking of being a supporter of England, he wasn't necessarily for the monarchy in England, but he was in support of their practices. He tried to push for the president to be called His Highness and felt that democracy just simply wouldn't work, instead being openly in support of a supreme leader. He was also exceptionally thin-skinned, so much so that he made it illegal to criticize the president, which was him at the time, under the guise of preparing for the anticipated war with France. Adam created the Aliens and Sedition Act of 1798. The premise being the fear that non-citizens would side with the French and cause issues. So the alien part of that was the requirement for citizenship was changed from 5 years to 14 years and allowed the president to deport any aliens as he saw fit. It also allowed them to be arrested, imprisoned, and deported during wartime. It also made it incredibly difficult for naturalized citizens to vote. Now, the Sedition Act made it a crime for American citizens to, quote, print, utter, or publish any false, scandalous, and malicious writing, end quote, about the government. Now, Adams himself admitted that he rendered free speech illegal for national security. Those who were found guilty of this newly illegal speech could be fined or imprisoned. Though that is not all that could or would happen. Benjamin Franklin Bach published less than kind words about Adam, and as a result, Bach's house was vandalized, he was assaulted, and his then pregnant wife received death threats. The acts were overturned by Thomas Jefferson, though, when he took office. There's not much else to say about the man. He was not elected for a second term as president, and his presidency was not particularly memorable, aside from the fact that he was the second president. He was an intelligent man and surprisingly was loyal to his wife, who he seemed to adore. That is really all that I have to say on him, though. But like with Washington, I didn't want to go over the good things because I want to be negative. I'm finally back and we're going to be negative. So there's that. But no, I just thought this was interesting to kind of look up like the crimes or the dark side of presidents or founding fathers that you don't really hear about. As somebody fascinated with history, there was a lot of this that I didn't know, and I wish they had taught me in school, but they didn't. But no, yeah, John Adams kind of just sucked. I'm not a fan of his. Most people weren't. He wasn't elected for a second term as president, while Washington had been unanimously voted in twice. Twice. But that's life for you. Anyway, that is all that I have for you today. Tomorrow I will be talking about Aaron Burr. That's gonna be a fun one. I have lots of information on that guy. But yeah, so check that out tomorrow if you want to see more of us. If you liked the video, hit that thumbs up, maybe drop us a subscribe, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.